It was a socio-musicological challenge for them. One major thing I accomplished was excellent diction. I figured if the audience could not hear the words clearly, then there would be no point to standing there warbling sound. After the recital, numerous audience members gathered around me to ask specific questions about the music and the composers. To get to that response meant I accomplished something well beyond the norm. Those students experienced sounds unfamiliar to them, which got into their psyches. Many also expressed the sheer joy of hearing the warm quality of my voice. Naturally, that pleased me immensely. It seemed as if I blinked, and it was 3 days before my NECMA Master's recital. During the previous semester, I purchased a nice, muted, pinkish-colored long gown and matching pumps. Although the outfit looked acceptable on me, I did not feel nearly as elegant as I had in the long, soft turquoise gown my mother made for my senior recital 2 years earlier. I suppose she spoiled me. That dress, fashioned by her, was the ultimate formal garment. Excitement filled the air the moment I awakened, the morning of my recital. Knowing my parents, Andrew and Mr. Vassilonis, my former voice teacher from the Cleveland Conservatory of Musical Studies, were all in town, had my pulse racing. In an effort to remain as calm as possible, I chose to see them after the presentation. My roommates also vacated the apartment to give me ample solitude. I packed up my clothing and took a taxi to the school. Since it was a Saturday late afternoon, early evening, practice rooms were readily available. I walked into my favorite room and vocalized. I put a paper over the window and used the practice room as my dressing room. In a short while, it was time for me to enter Crown Recital Hall and warm up with TT. Although I had sung many programs, this one had me rather anxious. I did a series of deep breathing exercises because waiting backstage was nerve-wracking. Then I sat quietly until the clock on the wall read 7:30. TT came to get me and we proceeded down the hallway and on to the stage. The audience applauded enthusiastically. We bowed, took our places, and began. Somehow I got in the zone and never let go. My mind and spirit were in sync. I sculpted each phrase by allowing myself to become the music. I believed in every art song and was determined to deliver each as a sermon. Before long, the intermission came forth. TT told me we were performing like a well-oiled machine. The previous musical moments had felt extraordinary. I prayed for strength to continue to envelop the audience into the songs of two exceptional American composers whose cultural roots were African. 10 minutes later, intermission was over. The lights flickered to signal the audience to take their seat. Once again, TT and I took to the stage. This time, I kicked myself into a high gear and sang with spiritual depth that told the listeners, truth is upon us. When we finished, the audience was on its feet, applauding and demanding I sing an encore. I saved my soul's been anchored in the Lord for this special time. It was an electrifying ending. After the recital, Andrew was the first person to come backstage. He must have sprinted to reach the area behind the curtain so rapidly. He grabbed me and told me the performance was absolutely magnificent. He continued by saying I had pulled the audience into the songs in a way that allowed the listeners to become personally acquainted with them. He further described the songs as little vignettes, painting a picture of aspects in life's journey. I never expected him to have such an insight to my recital material. It told me he definitely ingested the songs intellectually and spiritually. By this time, the backstage area had filled with audience members. When I saw my voice teacher, I hugged her while thanking her for such inspired vocal guidance. She indicated pride in having me as her student and predicted I would have a fine singing career. In a timely manner, she met my former voice teacher, Mr. Vassalonis. They praised each other for the ways in which they had cared for my voice. I took the opportunity to invite both teachers to my upcoming wedding. Too many people were trying to fit in the backstage area, so Titi and I went back on the stage to accommodate the crowd. At long last, my parents were in view. Mommy looked at me with her "that's my singing baby" look and kissed me. Daddy reached around her and kissed me too. They were filled with pride and told me so. The maintenance crew rearranged the chairs in the recital hall to fit the round tables on which the caterers placed snacks for the reception. There was a sense of merriment in the air. The chatter decibel level was very high. My roommates together chanted loudly, "She is a good roommate, too." After I changed clothes, Andrew, Mommy, Daddy, and I went to their hotel. They all would leave the next morning, so a bit more celebration was in order. The entire event passed too quickly, considering the time it took to prepare for that program. At any rate, the work paid off because the performance was very successful. I could now concentrate on my academics exams exclusively. At my church job the next morning, I could hardly keep my eyes open. I was tired of singing and really needed a few days off from everything. The upcoming week pushed me to my physical limit as I tackled the last chapters of all the academics in preparation for finals. A group of us studied together and tested each other, which was a very good idea. All that studying paid off because I breezed through everything, plus the recital committee unanimously recommended me for the highest master's performance honor of distinction, the coveted Eximius commendation. Hallelujah! I was finished. It was over. Whew! Only graduation exercises awaited. Monday, June the 3rd, I reserved a rental car for Monday, June 10th, and spent that week packing. I had accumulated lots of personal belongings, which had to be sorted, evaluated, organized, and labeled. I sent wedding invitation cards to some of my former classmates from the Cleveland Conservatory of Musical Studies, the organist, member, and choir members from Calvary Chapel Presbyterian Church in Cleveland, and more. On Wednesday, June the 5th, the country was stunned once more by another assassination. This time it was Senator Robert Bobby Kennedy, brother of assassinated former President John F. Kennedy. As we had done for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., my roommates and I watched the details about the murder of the popular senator on TV. It seemed surreal to see footage of Bobby Kennedy having been shot to death by a man named Sirhan Sirhan. This wild man kept firing after he was apprehended, wounding 5 other people. Even after he was punched in the face, he tried to wiggle free to continue shooting, but was then quite forcefully subdued. Chaos followed. Although many people witnessed the killing, conflicting reports confused everybody. Another sad day had gripped our country. Thursday, June 6th, was my last church job rehearsal for the final Sunday service. After sharing the shock of the murder of Bobby Kennedy, I let the choir know how much I enjoyed working with them and offered my heartfelt appreciation for the choir director for selecting me to sing such wonderful music. Andrew called to report he was adjusting to his new position in Erie quite well and had also looked at a few houses. Although he wanted to have a house in which we could move immediately after our wedding, he did not want to solely decide on it. In light of that, he asked if we could pick a house together after the wedding and have our honeymoon at a later date. It was a thoughtful suggestion, so I readily agreed. Additionally, he informed me of his plans to help finance the cost of the wedding. Traditionally, the father of the bride bore the financial burden, but Andrew thought that was unfair. Still further, he forewarned me that being relatively new at this demanding position with responsibilities far beyond those in Albany, he could not take any time off. So he would drive to Youngstown after work on Friday afternoon before our Saturday wedding and report for his clinical duties on Monday morning, a married man. I would live with him in his basement apartment the week prior to getting to Western Massachusetts for the music festival. I understood completely and processed all that information as part of my new life's journey. I kicked myself into high gear and took off. Most people are high-spirited about commencement, but I was rather blah about the Sunday afternoon ceremony. It was anticlimactic, plus I don't like graduations, and I think I already moved on in my head. I muddled through it, got my degree, said farewell to my friends, made my way back to the apartment, and went to bed by 9 o'clock, just as my roommates returned from the festivities. They were surprised to learn I skipped all of the after-graduation hoopla. Early Monday morning, I got the rental car, packed it, hugged my roommates goodbye, and drove home. Hours later, when I arrived in Youngstown, a mystifying feeling enveloped me. I spoke out loud saying, "Whoa, I'm a grown woman with a master's degree who is about to be married to the magnificent man I love." I was tuckered out when I got home. I left everything in the car and went in the house. After greeting and chatting a little with Mama, I ate a bite and went to bed. I was too tired to wait for Daddy to come home from working the 3:11 shift. I arose very early Tuesday morning, headed out to the car, removed everything, and neatly stacked the boxes in the garage. By the time Daddy came out to help me, I was finished and ready to take the car to the rental center. Upon seeing him, I ardently hugged him and asked if he would drive his car to the rental company to bring me home. He agreed to assist me. On the way back home, he informed me that Miss Maida, as I called her, had spruced up her house and grounds in preparation for my wedding and wanted to speak to me about the particulars of the ceremony and reception. I told Daddy I had a lot to deal with concerning the wedding. He brought to light the fact I am not happy unless I am tackling multiple projects. He also knew I was tired from all I had done over the past few weeks and suggested I take the rest of the day off and start fresh the next day. His analysis was on target. Back at home, I shared Daddy's observation with Mommy. She agreed with him and ordered me to rest. Therefore, after eating some cereal, I got on the couch and took a nap. I woke up about 4 p.m. a bit sluggish. Daddy had gone to work and Mama was upstairs. I lethargically went upstairs to visit the restroom. Mama told me I had gone through a lot and needed a restful night's sleep. She reminded me about the numerous ventures I recently undertook, including driving the long distance home just yesterday. All these enterprises had worn me out. I then went down to the kitchen in search of something to eat. I wasn't really hungry, but I thought I should consume something. Upon opening the refrigerator, I saw a big bowl of strawberry jello with sliced bananas beckoning me to devour it. It was a perfect selection. I filled a small bowl full and partook of the shaky dish. I loved the way jello tasted and how it slid down my throat. Mama came down and asked if I needed her to cook something. I instantly told her I was enjoying the jello, and it was all I wanted. That was good news to her ears because she was too tired. We spent the evening talking about our numerous wedding responsibilities. There was more to do than I realized. Instead of sending wedding invitations, the wedding would be announced in church with the weekly announcements by the church secretary. It would also be printed in the church bulletin, inviting everyone to the ceremony. That way, no one will be overlooked. Mama had called the Barden Choral Club members to invite them. I hope to have it written up in the Sunday, June 16th Youngstown newspaper. So, I had already sent the info and pictures to them that Saturday, May the 25th, while in Boston, in order to beat the 2-week deadline. The main thing I stressed for all the news releases was for guests to forego the tradition of bringing gifts. I thought the whole idea of a department store wedding registry was ludicrous. Andrew and I preferred sharing our love and happiness with friends and family rather than having guests checking out a pile of gifts on a table at the reception. We didn't want to overemphasize the materialistic side of life. Mama suggested I ride out to Miss Maida's homestead the following day and talk to her in person. At that point, I called Mrs. Mickles to make sure she and Linda were all set to come to Youngstown. I got excited hearing her voice on the phone. She informed me They would be driving from Arizona and using my wedding as a part of their vacation itinerary. What a sweetheart she was to make me a part of her eastbound journey. They would be staying with her good friend, Mrs. Green, in Liberty, on the far north side of Youngstown. I decided on a casual reception, a sort of backyard barbecue style, since we would be out in the country. Mommy had asked Mrs. Templeton from Templeton's Caterers to provide the food and had a pamphlet from which I could pick dishes. She thought a finger food reception was the perfect choice. In that manner, guests would be able to mingle and enjoy each other's company while eating an assortment of dishes. From Templeton's list of finger foods, I chose meatballs with assorted savory sauces, dainty chicken salad tea sandwiches, deli trees with assorted meats and cheeses, stuffed mushrooms, vegetable rolls, fruit trays, sliced breads and rolls, chocolates, assorted cookies, and lemon tarts with Italian meringue, and ginger ale punch. And, of course, the wedding cake. Now, that was quite an assortment of food. A little of this and a little of that made a lot of a whole lot. I called Jimmy Jericho to ask if his trio could provide music for my reception. He was a local musician whom people loved. The guitar, upright bass, and drums would be the perfect sound for the party atmosphere. They would also play music to which we could dance. Luck was on my side, for his trio was available due to a sudden cancellation of another event. He was rather happy to be able to gig that evening. I contacted Mommy's close friend, Mrs. Ottilie Dawson, to get the address and telephone number of her daughter, Dorisa. When I was a newborn, Dorisa made her way into the hospital to see me at the tender age of 13. Our families had been close for many years. Knowing those facts, it was a no-brainer to want her as my matron of honor. I had not seen Dorisa for a few years, so I was overjoyed to hear her voice on the phone. She lived in Pittsburgh and was married to a highly regarded minister and had 2 little girls, Ilona and Paulina. Not only did she enthusiastically agree to be my matron of honor, but also agreed to have her 7-year-old daughter, Paulina, be my flower girl. 12-year-old Ilona would be an usher with my 11 and 12-year-old nieces. I jumped up and down with excitement because I had also gotten Dorisa's older brother, Rob, to take wedding pictures. By this time, I had done enough and decided to go to bed. I awakened the Wednesday morning ready to continue my quest to have everything in place for the wedding. Mommy, Daddy, and I drove out to Miss Maydaw's land. As soon as I saw her, I ran and hugged her with great vitality. She was exuberant about hosting my wedding. My parents and I were flabbergasted over the changes which had been made to her house and the land. Miss Maida said upon buying the homestead, she desired renovations to be made. Her husband quickly got the underpinning of the house secured. He then had repairs made to the dining room ceiling, remodeled the kitchen, upstairs bathroom, and the good-sized powder room close to the side door entrance, and also accessible from the inside of the house. I remembered that powder room being convenient for guests at the Barton Choral Club picnic some years earlier. All that work was completed over a period of a year and a half. Then they coped with a 2-year hiatus, mainly because they were tired of their lives being turned upside down with constant reconstruction. Hence, the wedding ignited her and hubby to restart their quest to overhaul the entire acreage. Mr. LeSure, also credited having a major event scheduled, boosted his view of the property. Their house had a fresh coat of paint, plus newly mounted attractive shutters, appropriate for a house built in the late 1800s. The manicured landscape looked fantastic. The asphalt driveway had been widened substantially to accommodate twice as many cars. In addition, there was a gravel road linked to the driveway. Connected to the driveway was a lovely brick walkway leading to the gazebo and on to a pond and scenic meadow. The main reason I chose this locale was because of the amazing gazebo with a large brick front yard or courtyard that led up to it. I asked Mr. LeSure why it was there in the first place. He said the previous owner of the property loved to show off by throwing lavish outdoor summer parties. This man hired bands to play concerts in the gazebo. The guests sat on long benches in the sizable bricked front area. He also made the brick area so the guests could dance. I found it interesting that someone would go to such lengths to impress people, yet fail to refurbish the inside of the house. But I suppose all that was now utterly irrelevant, since everything had been totally renewed. Subsequently, that scenic tree-shaded spot was perfect for my celebration. While looking at the layout of the land, I checked out the numerous types of coverings shown in the party center rental store brochure and decided on a medium reception tent with a portable dance floor. If it rained, the ceremony would move inside the house, and the sizable wraparound screen porch would do the trick. But the reception would still be in the tent. We left truly feeling good about the ceremony location. The three of us then stopped at the party center rental store to reserve the table, tent, and chairs. Afterwards, Daddy took us to dinner at a restaurant near the party store. Mommy was happy not to cook that afternoon. Once we got home, I flopped down on the couch and did nothing more that day except read the newspaper. Mommy suddenly blurted, "I forgot to tell you, Judy is able to be a bridesmaid." I was thrilled beyond belief, for I had not seen her since she went to college. Thursday was a very important day because I had to pick my wedding dress. I was nervous about selecting the garment because I thought all wedding dresses looked similar. I also hated trying on clothes. Needless to say, I dreaded the chore facing me. But I reeled in my courage and journeyed with Mama to the Wedding Village dress shop. Looking at all those white dresses made me dizzy. After trying on only 2 dresses, I settled on an enchanting, full-length Victorian-style white satin gown with long lace sleeves, a high ruffled lace neck collar, and ruffles flowing down the front of the dress on the right and on the left. Much to my surprise, I really liked it. It was elegant, courtly, and dignified. It made me feel majestic. Mommy thought it was really classic and would go well with the white flower crown upon my head. I decided not to wear a veil because I did not like veils. Plus, it would be an unnecessary nuisance. Still, my job was not finished because I had also to pick my bridesmaid dresses, the matron of honor dress and the flower girl dress. Everyone had sent their measurements and dress sizes, so I went full steam ahead. I couldn't believe how difficult it was to find dresses I liked. Typically, bridesmaid dresses were thought to be rather unattractive, so I wanted to break that custom. After a good while, I found the ones I wanted my ladies to wear. The bridesmaid dress was a knee-length V-neck, gently flared white dress with sheer lace sleeves and a black sash. The matron of honor dress was a just below the knee white V-neck florid dress with 3/4 length lace sleeves and a white satin sash. The flower girl dress was a sleeveless, square neck, knee-length white flared dress with 2 tiers of ruffled lace near the bottom. They planned to wear their own shoes. I wanted lots of flowers and was so happy Daddy ordered a variety of flowers well ahead of time. He allowed the florist to make decisions about what flowers should go where. My only stipulation: all must be white. White gardenias would be held by my 2 bridesmaids and matron of honor. I will carry a bouquet of white stephanotis blossoms held together with black ribbons. Dainty white daisies will be reserved for the reception tables. The flower girl will carry a heart-shaped sign made from leaves and baby's breath that reads, "Here comes the bride." White carnations are to be arranged around the perimeter of the ceremony area. In Boston, after my master's recital in the hotel lobby on the way to my parents' room, I asked Mama if she would sing a prayer for Andrew and me during the wedding ceremony. She said usually the mother of the bride does nothing except sit and cry. But since she sang during my brother's wedding, she could sing for my wedding as well. I needed her glorious lyric soprano voice to bestow God's blessings upon us, to be wed in His name. I then handed her the music and words to the hymn-like piece of music I wrote, titled "Blessings Be Upon This Company." The words were, "God who blesses matrimony, send your spirit from above on this humble man and woman who here make their vows of love." And the chorus says, "Blessings be upon this couple. There's no need to have a doubt, for their faith is planted firmly, following God's path throughout." Verse 2, "Give them joy to lighten sorrow. Give them hope to brighten life. Go with them to face the morrow as a husband and a wife." It was perfect timing for me to spring this music on Mama. Daddy put our tape recorder from home in the room. They brought it to record my recital. He and Andrew then left to get some food. The snacks at the reception had not satisfied their hunger, nor ours for that matter. That period alone with Mama was just enough time to listen to the music. After reading the words and hearing the tape I made of me singing and playing that piece, Mama liked it very much and looked forward to singing it. Needless to say, I was deliriously happy and thanked her over and over. I emphasized wanting this to be our secret. I had also made a tape recording of the accompaniment for her to use in practice sessions and for the actual wedding service. Now back at home, I still wanted this solo to be a surprise to everybody, including Daddy, Andrew, and Reverend Jones. As expected, Mama learned the song while Daddy was at work. As luck would have it, that Friday we had the house to ourselves, so Mama sang it for me. She sang it beautifully and with conviction, as I knew she would. The phone rang. I answered and heard Judy's mellow speaking voice on the other end. She was calling to confirm her arrival in Youngstown and on to North Jackson should be around noon the next Saturday. Everything had been done except selecting a PA sound system and microphones. Daddy and I would do that tomorrow morning, exactly 1 week before the wedding. While thinking on that subject, I called my cousin Doogie and asked if he would oversee the sound equipment. He excitedly, for he liked diddling with electronic sound amplification and being in charge to boot. I truly thought I could relax when I realized I had not made the program. Oh. Well, I found my typewriter and began typing out the program. The cover page, The Wedding of Johanna LanYe and Andrew Emerson Porter. Saturday, June 22nd, 1968, the LeSure Homestead, North Jackson, Ohio, 3 p.m. The inside page said the ceremony. Prelude music. Mrs. Larames Mickles, violin. Linda Mickles, viola. Seating of the mother. Processional. Readings. Wedding message. Exchange of vows. Exchange of rings. Prayer music. An announcement of marriage. Then the recessional. Inside page 2, the wedding party. The minister, Reverend Rufus Macon Jones. Matron of honor, Dorissa Harrison. Best man, Philip Myers. Bridesmaids, Ursula Myers and Judy Lumpkin. Groomsmen, Romeo Walters and Harold Sims. Flower girl, Paulina Harrison. Ushers, Bevy Robertson, Carlos Robertson, and Elona Harrison. It came out nicely. I was proud that I could do that in such good form. Saturday morning, Daddy and I went to the audiovisual establishment called the Media Room. There I picked a public address system package that would suit all my needs. Luckily, it did not take as long as I thought it would to make the arrangements. We then took a jaunt to the printer, conveniently located across the street. I picked a pastoral design, which complemented the natural outdoor setting. The programs would be ready for pickup Wednesday. On the way back home, I told Daddy how happy I was to have sent the wedding announcement on Monday, June 3rd, to the Cleveland newspapers, the Cleveland Conservatory Alumni bi-monthly newsletter, plus handwritten invitations to Mr. Victor Babinko, Director-President of the Cleveland Conservatory, Mu Epsilon Phi Music Sorority, and of course, my former voice teacher, Mr. George Vassalonis. When we returned home, Mama had spoken to Ursula on the phone and relayed the message that she and Philip would be at the homestead between 12:15 and 12:30 next Saturday, in time for the light run-through scheduled at 1:30. She decided to have baby Phil stay at home with the babysitter. I was pleased not to need a rehearsal the day before. I planned to direct the run-through like a music performance warm-up. Frankly, I was bushed. I decided to lounge the rest of the day. Daddy took off to a local church having a fish fry building fundraiser to buy some fish dinners for us. There was another phone call, and it was from Andrew. He told me his work schedule was strenuous but manageable. Being in charge of such a large division kept his nose to the grind. Putting all that aside, he was truly bursting at the seams with excitement about our upcoming wedding day and was sorry he could not be with me to assist with the preparation. I told him not to fret because we had everything under control. My honey reported he will wear a fashionable white dressy Nehru jacket with a black handkerchief in the pocket square, a black mandarin shirt, black cufflinks, white dress pants, white long dress socks, and a white dress-up lace shoes. He will look, as the folks say, so fine. With all that happened to me since Christmas, I had not heard how Philip's 2 prep school music jobs turned out the past semester. Hence, Andrew informed me that his music teaching techniques were so outstanding until both prep schools wanted him full-time the next school year. Now Philip had the difficult task of choosing the best school for him. Naturally, Philip will be the best man. He will wear a white vest, white dress shirt, white cufflinks, white bow tie, black dress pants, and black dress socks, and black dress shoes. Continuing the conversation, Harold Sims, Andrew's former colleague in Albany, New York, will be driving to Youngstown and arriving Friday evening. He will be joined by Andrew's college buddy, Romeo Walters, flying in from Chicago. Both guys are to be groomsmen. Romeo reserved a rental car to drive to North Jackson. Although they did not know each other, they agreed to stay 2 nights in a motel just off the Ohio Turnpike, near North Jackson. Andrew already purchased their white dress shirts, white cufflinks, white cummerbunds, and white bow ties. They will bring their own black dress pants and black dress shoes. Mommy came to me, took my hand, led me upstairs and into her and Daddy's bedroom. The look on her face told me something was about to unfold. She sat me down on the side of the bed, went to her closet, and pulled out the most gorgeous, tailored, long-sleeved, white linen suit. Whew! It was the prettiest suit I had ever seen. The jacket had 3 rows of small, embroidered, brocade Victorian black, silver-beaded, fleur-de-lis patterned fabric surrounding the waistline, akin to a belt. Beneath the waist, on the right and left sides, 2 larger fleur-de-lis embroidered brocade designs fanned upward and outward. Under the jacket was a soft white satin blouse, embroidered with a smaller fleur-de-lis pattern around the neckline, with just enough space above the neckline for one of her beautiful necklaces. The straight skirt was unadorned. The suit was absolutely exquisite. I could not get over how beautifully Mama sewed. Her talents simply amazed me. In addition, she handed me a shoebox for me to look at her lovely new white pumps that had a white flower pattern on them. Yet she had not finished her reveal. She opened a hat box to disclose a knockout white wide-brimmed church hat she personally fashioned for the occasion. She could have made hats for profit, but of course she didn't. She made it for me and held the suit up to her so I could get an impression of the pieces together. What a sumptuous clothing ensemble. She was the picture of grace and refinement. Next, she went into Daddy's closet to show me his new white dress jacket with a black and gray intertwining geometric trellis pattern handkerchief in the square pocket that matched the black and gray intertwining geometric trellis pattern vest with black trim edging. Accompanying the jacket and vest will be a dress white shirt, black background, silver-toned metal monogrammed J cufflinks, a long black tie, black dress socks, and two-toned black and white dress lace-up shoes. He is bound to look exceptionally smart and genteel in that dandy outfit. He even got a new pair of black-rimmed eyeglasses. Daddy purchased the entire outfit at Hirschberger's department store in downtown Youngstown. While Mama was returning the clothes to the closets, the phone rang. Since I was close to the phone, I answered it. The voice on the other end said his name was Sean McGowan, Andrew's former high school principal. He wanted to speak to me and or Mama. I told him I was Johanna and my mother was also in the room. He asked if it was possible to talk to both of us simultaneously. I answered affirmatively, gave Mama the phone, and ran downstairs to get the other phone. He began to tell us about Andrew's years at the orphanage school. He revealed to us how much he loved and admired Andrew in his youth. He said Andrew was the smartest, most caring boy he had ever met. He disclosed that he and his wife very much wanted to adopt Andrew, but he would have been dismissed from his job for showing personal interest in a colored boy. He admitted doing everything he could behind the scene to help Andrew along his life's journey. This wonderful man wanted us to know that he and his wife, Noreen, planned to attend the wedding. His prayers had been answered, for he wished Andrew could someday find happiness with a young lady and join a loving and supportive family. Mama told him how much she and Daddy loved Andrew. She said she embraced him as her son shortly after meeting him. Together, we expressed heartfelt appreciation for Mr. McGowan's positive role in Andrew's earlier life. I added, he and his wife will always have a place with our family. Mommy and I looked forward to meeting them in person next Saturday. Daddy returned with 3 catfish dinners. I had never eaten catfish. For years I heard black people raving over this particular fish, so this was my chance to taste it. I very seldom ate fish of any kind because I was afraid of swallowing a fish bone and choking to death. But despite that, I occasionally ate white fish that aren't fishy taste. On the other hand, I could not tolerate any type of seafood, especially those gross-looking crustaceans that reminded me of large sea insects or monsters. The 3 of us began consuming the food. The smell was rather pungent. I picked at the fish and nibbled little pieces, all the while checking for bones. I ate the veggies and macaroni and cheese surrounding the fish. After trying to consume the fish, yet all the while not liking the taste, I became frustrated and wanted some real food. There was a can of potted meat in the cabinet, so I filled up on it with crackers and polished off the sides from the dinner. My parents did not openly react to the meal, but instead commented on the good-tasting apple dumplings. They cleverly deflected any conversation about the meal to the dessert and the pleasure they experienced from helping the little church with its expansion plans. Daddy then went to bed for a few hours before going to work later that night. After that disappointing meal, I flopped on the couch and tried to process the fact that 1 week from today, I would become a married woman. I felt somewhat panicked because I really didn't know how to be a wife. I loved Andrew with everything in me, but how will I feel being with him every day for the rest of my life? I wondered also if he was a bit nervous. I remembered how determined he was to have me become his girlfriend, only 1 day after we met. I recalled how excited I was to be with him and how I missed him when he went to Peru. Frankly, our courtship has been rather brief, and marriage is a huge step. I meditated a few minutes until I felt a connection to the Almighty. I distinctly heard a voice tell me Andrew was chosen for me and I was chosen for him in the grand scheme of life. As a result, we were embarking upon God's plan. I should not worry because God does not make mistakes. The love we have for each other will direct us into a wonderfully fulfilled marriage. I should just put my trust in the higher power and follow the blueprint for success. All at once, I relaxed and focused on the abundant love I had for Andrew. I recounted how comfortable we were with each other. I then noted how negative thoughts can destroy something beautiful. Silently, I thanked the Almighty for speaking to me and directing my sights toward the right path of marital advancement. I felt as if my mind had been drained and refilled with the highest octane known to humankind. This was a good time for me to call it a day. I did so and went straight to bed. Sunday, the next day, my folks went to church, but I stayed home. I began going through the house searching for items from my past I wanted to have in my new married life. I rummaged through the attic, in closets, in dresser drawers, and in the basement. It was unbelievable how much stuff I had. It turned out to be the perfect opportunity for me to throw out lots of junk. I wondered why I kept so many things from my childhood that meant nothing to me as a young adult. I picked out only a few keepsakes. Only the most precious, special possessions were saved. I filled a number of bags and took them to the dumpster behind the garage. Unlike going away to college, going away with my husband will be permanent and absolutely forever. I left some of my favorite toys in hopes my children would play with them when they come to visit their grandparents. Such thoughts were different but exciting. I knew I was putting the cart before the horse, but I could not keep my mind from wandering in that direction. I wondered what Andrew was doing and thinking, because he is such an organized man. I imagined he was making room to store my belongings until we found a house. Just before my folks returned from church, Andrew called. He sounded excited because he had done everything on his to-do list for the wedding, for living arrangements, and for storage for my belongings. He asked if I needed him to do anything else, and I answered yes. I reminded him to come to Youngstown tomorrow afternoon to get our marriage license. He said he would leave work at 2 o'clock, come straight to Youngstown, pick me up, go to the Mahoning County Courthouse, sign for the license, drop me off at home, say a quick hello to Mom and Dad, and get back to Erie. I knew he was stretched to the max, so I told him to get as much rest and sleep as possible the next few days, because the wedding will be taxing. Dealing with the wedding and guests would wear down our immune systems, so it behooved us to drink plenty water, eat healthy vegetables to combat unwanted impurities. He remarked how practical my thinking was and would heed my advice. I shared with him the wonderful phone call from Mr. McGowan. He was elated to learn that his former school principal and wife would attend the wedding. Andrew made Mr. McGowan his father figure during the first 18 years of his life and held him in high esteem. Mommy and Daddy came in and spoke briefly to Andrew, telling him they were in high spirits about the wedding and our marriage. The three of them exchanged warm-hearted words, and my folks ended by saying, "See you soon, son." Mama told us she was making a very easy Sunday dinner called cabbage and chicken soup made from leftover chicken and cabbage. She needed to only warm it up. Along with the soup were candied yams, also easily made by basically peeling and slicing the sweet potatoes or yams, mixing sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, and adding it all in a hot buttered skillet and cooking on a low flame for about 50 minutes or until the ingredients were candied. It was an ideal choice for that Sunday, for Mama didn't need to be stressed out cooking some monumental meal. Daddy ate and then napped, for he had to go to work that night. Mommy and I took it easy too. She read the paper and I turned on the TV. At 7 p.m. on ABC, I watched Land of the Giants, a show that fascinated me for some reason. Next, of course, on CBS was The Ed Sullivan Show. Obviously, I needed a leisurely evening free of anything complicated or trying. Monday through Thursday was filled with gathering everything needed for the ceremony and putting them in the Buick to be taken to the homestead on Friday. Thankfully, all moved along as planned. We received numerous congratulatory calls from people who could not attend, and calls from those who planned to attend but needed directions. Even Aunt Cleona and Uncle Johnny called to tell us they would be there Saturday. Mrs. Mickles and Linda called to let us know they were in town and would be at the homestead at 12:45 on Saturday. My wedding was the top topic of discussion with relatives in the Youngstown, Warren, Cleveland, Akron, Elyria vicinity. The buildup was nerve-wracking, but I attempted to stay calm. My folks skipped church choir rehearsal on Thursday evening. Daddy's senior status level at the mill made it possible for him to rearrange his schedule to have the weekend off. Before we realized, it was Friday, June the 21st. My parents and I drove to the homestead to deliver everything. The LaSure homestead was ready. What an incredible setting. It looked like someplace in a tourist/vacation magazine. It was a warm, overcast day, and showers were likely. In fact, drizzles began while we were there. Naturally, I hoped the weather would be warm and sunny for Saturday. However, no matter the weather, the wedding will happen. Soon after hauling the things inside the house, we left. The reality was even more evident. The three of us were quite quiet. In fact, maybe too quiet. One would have thought we were preparing for a funeral. I broke the silence by saying, "It's a wedding. Nobody died. Let's see some smiles." While at the homestead, it hit me my parents' thought said, it was their last day with me as their little girl. And I just couldn't understand how it felt to face that reality. I told them I'd always be their little girl at heart, but I'd grown up. I explained they were not losing me. They were, in fact, gaining a son, a young man whom they embraced wholeheartedly. Plus, in the not-so-distant future, hopefully, they would become grandparents. Daddy said he looked forward to spoiling my kids. Mama said sometimes change is difficult, but reflected on the past and admitted to looking forward to the future. At least the funeral dirge was over. I shouted gleefully, "Let's celebrate by having an old McDonald's hamburger, fries and shakes." Daddy pulled into the popular fast food drive-thru and ordered. We had fun reminiscing about many things and downing a few burgers. We decided to go home because Andrew would be arriving shortly. It was a good thing we did go home because he got there sooner than expected. Only a few minutes after we went inside, Andrew rang the back doorbell. Daddy let him in and asked why he got to Youngstown so early. He said his staff gave him a wedding luncheon, told him they would take care of the afternoon duties, including rescheduling, and insisted that he leave to prepare himself for his wedding. He was appreciative of their sensitivity to his upcoming nuptials. Having packed everything in his car the night before, he had only to drive to Youngstown, arriving 3 hours ahead of schedule. Naturally, we were happy to see each other. Andrew admitted to being nervous about wanting everything to come off according to our plans. He was actually giddy because only one day was left and we would be married. I took his hand and steered him out of the house and into the garage. I asked him to put some of my belongings in the trunk of his car, for after the wedding, I will not come home with my parents. He said, "That's right. You will come home with me to Erie. We will drive both cars to our temporary residence." He noticed I had packed my car and was ready to begin our new lives. We locked both cars and went back inside the house. My parents were waiting to talk to us. They wanted to give us their full affirmation and well wishes for a harmonious life together. After those heartfelt moments, we all agreed to go to bed. That night would be the last night I'd sleep alone in my bed. I awakened Saturday morning and said out loud, "It's my wedding day." I looked out the window and saw another overcast day. But thank goodness it was not raining. It seemed as if I was moving twice as fast as normal, when I wasn't moving at all. I jumped out of bed and stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do next. Eventually, my mind returned, and I made strides toward the bathroom. As usual, Mama was already downstairs making breakfast and talking to Daddy. On the way back to the bedroom, Andrew met me in the hall and said, "Good morning, my soon-to-be wife." I laughed and asked if he slept at all that night. He said he caught some winks off and on through the night, but was unable to sleep normally. His excitement level was off the chart. I told him I managed to sleep after tossing and turning a bit. We came downstairs and joined our folks for breakfast. They decided to dress at home and arrive around 2 o'clock. Mama went down to the basement and began singing and vocalizing. Daddy thought her actions were strange, but credited them to the stress of the day. He said we deal with situations in our own ways. I simply smiled and agreed with Daddy, knowing all along that Mama was getting her voice ready to sing at the wedding. He had no idea the reason for me taking the tape recorder to the wedding. And that was not only to tape the ceremony, but also to provide Mama with the piano accompaniment needed for the prayer hymn she would sing. I had that tape with me to give to Cousin Doogie, who would play the tape at the appropriate time. I left the house at 10:30 a.m., driving my fully packed car to North Jackson. The sun was trying to make an appearance, which pleased me. I got to the homestead in time to meet everyone in the wedding party as they arrived between 11:30 and 12:45. The tent and chairs were all set, for they had been arranged by the company at 10 a.m. Miss Maida told me she and her husband were up and at 'em by 8 o'clock to be available to assist in any way necessary. I thanked them profusely for everything. My ladies really liked their dresses, which delighted me. Mrs. Mickle and Linda came early to be ready to play for guests as they arrived. I was overjoyed to see Mrs. Mickles, for I considered her to be a major influence in my musical life. Dorissa took on her role as matron of honor and helped everyone. Her dress was a perfect fit. She looked wonderful. Her little darling daughter, Paulina, looked adorable in her flowery girl dress. Judy and Ursula had a good time getting to know each other. Judy was more attractive and mature than ever. Philip wandered around the land and commented about the beauty of the setting. The groomsmen, Romeo and Harold, came over and introduced themselves to me. About 1 o'clock, Cousin Doogie came. I showed him how to work the PA system and the tape recorder. In so doing, he was the first to know Mama was singing. At 1:30, we had a walk through all the bases were covered. By 2 o'clock, Waylon and his family arrived. Waylon Jr. took his place as assistant to Cousin Doogie, and my nieces, Bevy and Carlos, joined Dorissa's daughter, Elena, to begin their duties as ushers. The weather cooperated fully by bringing forth warmth and sunshine. Dorissa's brother, Rob Dawson, arrived, equipped with 2 cameras ready to capture the special moments. When I saw my parents and Andrew pull up, I rushed over to the tent to put on my wedding gown. I didn't want Andrew to see me before the ceremony, for I was told that was bad luck. Guests began arriving around 2:30, and the Mickles duo started playing an assortment of familiar wedding music. Reverend Jones put on his white robe and positioned himself behind the lectern in the gazebo. The wedding party lined up at the house and walked to the back of the dedicated area. Waylon Jr. had another duty, and that was to escort Mama to her seat, which he did at exactly 3 p.m. Next, Andrew and Philip walked to the bottom step of the gazebo. The processional commenced. Mrs. Mickles and Linda played the traditional wedding march by Mendelssohn. Everyone looked fantastic. The ceremony followed the program and flowed flawlessly. When it came time for me to be escorted down the aisle by my father, I almost fainted. My flower girl proceeded down the aisle carrying the wonderful sign made of white flowers and leaves that read, "Here comes the bride," and the guests stood. The Mickles duo played the very familiar bridal chorus, better known as "Here Come the Bride," from the opera Lohengrin by Wagner. I took Daddy's arm and began to walk down the aisle. As much as I had been in the public's eye, nothing felt as scary as that long jaunt with everybody staring at me. Daddy had to hold me tightly as we walked because my legs were wobbly. As we moved along slowly and carefully toward the steps, Andrew came over, took my hand, and led me up the steps. I looked at him as he smiled warmly. I noticed Philip's warm smile as well. Daddy then took his seat next to Mama. When Reverend Jones said, "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God," etc., I remembered the numerous times I had heard those words when I sang at weddings. But this time, Those words had enormous meaning because they were aimed at me. I felt so much love coming from Andrew until I got swept into his essence. I looked deeply into his eyes and knew at that moment I loved Andrew with every fiber of my body. Finally, I was at peace with myself. We exchanged vows and rings like two little kids getting Christmas toys. Our enthusiasm and exuberance made the guests chuckle. Suddenly, I was absolutely euphoric. That euphoria came at exactly the right time, for Mama stood up, took the microphone, and began singing the touching wedding hymn I composed. Her voluptuous golden lyric soprano voice grabbed the souls of all in attendance. By the time she sang the second verse and chorus, give them joy to lighten sorrow. Give them hope to brighten life. Go with them to face the morrow as a husband and a wife. Ah, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Daddy began sobbing. So Rob Dawson consoled him. Andrew wept softly, while a teary-eyed Philip hugged him. Dorissa choked up as well, put her arms around me, and wiped my tears. Reverend Jones was so moved until he said, "Yes, Lord," audibly, several times. I was certain Mama had touched the core of our beings. I was also certain she was one of God's special angels. There was an unscheduled silence after that tender solo. It took a moment for everyone to regain composure. Then Reverend Jones continued. When he came to the special place where he asked Andrew, "Wilt thou have this woman to be thy wedded wife," etc., Andrew looked deep into my eyes and answered, "I will." From that point on, we never stopped looking at each other. Unexpectedly, at the special place for me, I blurted out in a high-pitched, song-like voice, "I will," which made people laugh. I'll never know why my voice got so high, but maybe it was because I was high on love. Next, the question, who gives this woman to be married to this man? Daddy answered, "I do." Then after some words, we placed the rings on each other's fingers. Reverend Jones joined our right hands together and finally, after more declaratory sentences, articulated the statement, "I pronounce that you are husband and wife together." Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Andrew Emerson Porter and his bride, Johanna LanYe Porter. Reverend did not need to tell Andrew to kiss the bride because he grabbed me and planted a long kiss upon my lips, which delighted the wedding guests so much until they cheered. The Mickles duo played joyful recessional music as Andrew and I led the wedding party down the steps and out to the far side of the gazebo where we would pose for pictures and greet guests. When they finished playing, they joined us for pictures. Mrs. Mickles said she was tremendously moved by my mother's singing and added I was blessed to have inherited such magnificent singing talent. I pointed out that it was the same between Linda and her. They were a superb string duo. She also said I was a beautiful bride, and Andrew was incredibly handsome. I hugged her tightly a few moments, for she meant so much to me. Linda hugged me and wished me the best. They both expressed regrets for not being able to stay for the reception. In the tent, the caterers were setting out food on beautifully decorated tables for the reception, which followed at 4:30 p.m. Jimmy Jericho and his trio arrived at 4:20, just in the nick of time to begin playing background music. I was bowled over with the number of people who came to my wedding. I would find out exactly how many attended when we checked the sign-in book later on. The first couple in line to greet us were the McGowans. Mr. McGowan still had tears in his eyes from the ceremony. He said it was the most beautiful wedding he had ever seen. I asked him about his wedding, and he told me he ran away with Noreen and eloped. His father did not approve of him because he was poor. He wanted Noreen to marry a medical doctor. However, her father came to like Mr. McGowan when he saw how hard he worked, provided for Noreen, and even put himself through college. I was impressed with him and his wife and invited them to visit us in Erie. Andrew held him in his arms and said, "Thank you for all you did when I was growing up." Next in line was Mr. Babenko. I was so happy to see him. He expressed how proud he was of me and planned to stay a while for the reception. With a big smile, he said, "I'd like to dance with the bride." He also commented on the beauty of Mama's voice and realized why I sang so beautifully. Mr. Vassalonis said his favorite voice student was a ravishing bride. He then gave me a warm hug and wished me marital bliss. My brother Waylon was beaming. He simply adored Andrew and wished for me to have a loving and lasting marriage. Ruthie and Mrs. Brevard commented on the beauty of my wedding gown and said the ceremony was stunning. It was wonderful watching our guests socializing and having a good time. Over the loudspeaker, Mr. Jericho announced it was time for the father-daughter, mother-son dance. The four of us danced. Then Philip danced with me, and Ursula danced with Andrew. Mr. Babinko graciously cut in and danced with me. Judy then danced with Andrew. Soon, everyone was dancing. Romeo Walters and Harold Sims had a good time informing people about how they came to know Andrew. It was like storytelling time. Those around them seemed fascinated with their information. Wouldn't you know it, Mrs. Smythe was there and provided some humor. She walked up to me and offered congratulations on marrying Andrew. But she said I better watch out for women who want to steal him from me. I just shook my head and thanked her for coming. When Andrew saw her, he eased away and greeted some more guests. When the trio began playing I Only Have Eyes for You, couples crowded the dance floor. It seemed that particular song struck the romantic nerve in many. Andrew and I, Mommy and Daddy, Philip and Ursula were among the couples who embraced each other on the dance floor. It was the hit song of the evening. Philip then tapped a glass and toasted the newlyweds. It was time for Andrew and me to feed each other wedding cake. We did so without making a mess. Then I took my bouquet of flowers and asked all the ladies to get ready to catch the bouquet when I tossed it over my head backwards. The drummer in the trio played a drum roll. I turned around and hurled the bouquet high over my head and into the crowd of ladies. Lo and behold, Dorissa's daughter, Elena, caught the bouquet. She was a bit too young to benefit from the catch, but it thrilled her nonetheless. Everyone commented on how good the food tasted and how beautiful everything was. The white theme was a success. My wedding was splendid and nothing went wrong. Around 6:30 p.m., people began leaving. Dorissa and the girls headed back to Pittsburgh. Judy said her farewells too. It was perfect timing for those who needed to return to destinations a bit far from Youngstown. It was also good for Philip and Ursula as they got back to Babyville. Those staying overnight had time to do more partying in area establishments if they chose, or have a laid-back evening. Before leaving, I hugged Harold and Romeo and thanked them for their participation. Mommy and Daddy thanked them as well, then said their goodbyes and left. I went in the house, took off my wedding gown, and carefully put it in the large plastic hang-up bag. Andrew followed me, took off his wedding outfit, and placed it in a plastic suit bag. He said, "I believe you are my wife." I said, "Yes, I am, and you are my husband." Now we could change clothes in front of each other. We checked around to make sure everything was okay and all was fine. The caterers had cleaned up. Plus, our guests had not left things in disarray. We thanked the Lashures for providing the most dazzling setting for our wedding. I kissed Miss Maida and invited her to visit us in Erie. Around 7:25 p.m., Andrew paid Mr. Jericho and took the remaining wedding cake and some food. We then got in our cars and headed to Erie. It took only an hour and 40 minutes before we arrived at Andrew's basement in-laws apartment. It was much nicer and larger than I had pictured in my mind. We parked our cars in the driveway and went inside. Of course, it was spotless. He tried to make it as livable as possible. He asked me if I was happy. I immediately told him I was deliriously happy. I asked him if he was happy. He said he was experiencing utopia because this was the happiest day of his life. I then asked if he was tired, and he admitted being weary. I told him I was worn out, but looked forward to spending our first night cuddled together in bed. He said he thought about our first night all the way back. I took advantage of the moment, undressed him, and put his PJs on him. He undressed me and put my baby doll PJs on me. Directly after, I went in the bathroom to freshen up, then came out and sat on the side of the bed. Subsequently, he made his way to the bathroom to do likewise. When finished, he came and sat next to me on the bed, wrapped his arms around me, and nudged me into the bed. I melted into his arms. I put my body close to him and placed my legs over his. He caressed and kissed my face, neck, shoulders, and lightly whisked my bosom. I sighed with approval, for it felt as though I was floating above the earth. In essence, we were at the threshold of our preferred manner of physical intimacy. He proceeded to gently rub my entire body, and I rubbed his body. I put particular emphasis on his buttocks, for he had the best formed body and bottom I had ever seen on a human being. I whispered, "I love you, Andrew," and he whispered, "I love you, Johanna." I then sprawled over him and placed my head on his chest. He placed his arm over me, and we gradually fell asleep. When I awakened Sunday morning, draped over Andrew, I knew all was well with the world. I hated to move, but I really needed to go to the restroom. I got up carefully and made my way to the facility. Andrew must have been very tired, for he remained in his position. However, the moment I tried to get back into the bed, he mumbled, "Good morning, my beloved," and scrambled out to also visit the restroom. When he returned, I was looking out the window and remarked how nice a neighborhood it was. He agreed and hoped we might find our house somewhere in the area. He took me to the kitchen and proceeded to make his own concoction for breakfast: peanut butter and bananas on toast with bacon on the side. He said he stumbled upon that combination by accident one morning when he could not find enough typical breakfast food. Surprisingly, it tasted rather good, and I told him so. He was relieved because he truly wanted to please me, but did not have enough time to go grocery shopping the week before our wedding. I sat there feeling rather lost, for I was not accustomed to doing anything in the kitchen except washing dishes. Somehow knowing I was uncomfortable, he asked, "Johanna, would it be all right if I cooked for us?" I answered, "Yes." He continued, "Sweetie, please don't fret about kitchen routines. I like to cook and you like to clean, so we make a good team. If you never cook, I'll love you just the same." He also reminded me that he cannot sing, but I still loved him. I felt a little better, yet I could not wait to do something special for him, which would add value to our marriage. He began talking about our beautiful wedding and how gorgeous I looked in my stunning wedding gown. I told him he looked extremely handsome in his white Nehru outfit. Then he pointed out the fact I planned the entire wedding from top to bottom and had impeccable taste with everything involved. He continued, "Everyone has strengths and weaknesses." He said he struggled with why he was ever born so long and hard, until he sometimes sank into deep depressions. He kept hearing them yell at him at the orphan for no reason at all. He stayed to himself, and at times his isolation level turned him against humanity. He fought hard against this by overdoing lending a helping hand. He would volunteer to assist anyone needing anything. He desperately wanted to be accepted. He then told me, had I not agreed to become his girlfriend that evening, he might have gone away somewhere, never to be found again. Andrew loved me more than the world could ever no. I put my arms around him and held him, for that moment was poignant. Andrew needed me in a profound way. Although I knew it intellectually, this day I felt the depth of his soul as he talked to me. I focused on him like never before. I put myself in his shoes and sympathized with his battles of feeling downtrodden. I knew I needed to feed him the reality of his tremendous success as a man. I was extremely blessed to have him in my life and blessed to be his wife. That moment of truth was the catalyst for our marriage. I totally got it. Our union allowed us to become much better, much stronger, and more valuable to society. After a few minutes, we let go of each other, and at the very same time, broke the silence by saying, "Let's take the boxes out of our cars." It was obvious we had gotten over a substantial hurdle. Our spirits were lifted. We joyously went to our cars, took out the boxes, and stacked them in the garage. We were very excited because inside those boxes were the makings of our new lives. Our energy level was high. I felt effervescent and smiled so much until my cheeks hurt. With that chore out of the way, Andrew told me about the 3 houses he chose for me to view. The first was a colonial house, the second was an English cottage, the third was a mid-century modern bungalow. After looking at pictures he took of each house, inside and out, and listening to his evaluation of them, I eliminated the English cottage. Although the price was reasonable, the rooms were too small, with too many archways. It also had a 1-car garage. Luckily, all 3 houses were in the same vicinity, not far from where we were. One thing concerned me the most, and that was the receptivity to black people possibly living in the neighborhood. Andrew thought his high-ranking position at the well-known clinic might sway the feelings of those who would otherwise balk at the notion of black neighbors. Also, learning that I was a rising opera singer just might seal the deal. Instead of disliking us based on our race, they would welcome us based on our standing in society. Nevertheless, I preferred living where folks were accepting of people just because they were people. We planned to look at the 2 houses the next day. I'm sure we would get a feel for the immediate neighborhood and the attitude of the realtor. Andrew was pretty sure we would break the color barrier no matter where we chose, because black people were not living in the area. He said we could be in the future of eerie history books. We stopped discussing housing and decided to look in the guest book to see who attended our wedding and how many people were there. Much to our amazement, 132 people witnessed our marriage ceremony. We heard a knock on the door, and Andrew got up to see who it was. It was his landlord, Gerard Blues, the CEO administrator of a large physical rehabilitation center. He had come to offer congratulations. We told him lots about our special day. Then we took the opportunity to ask him if he thought we would encounter difficulty if we bought a home in that area. He thought the area was turning into an oasis for up-and-coming, young, successful business people and their families. If anything, they would likely make us celebrities and dote upon us. He added, we would break the ice which had formed over many years. He turned to me and said, Andrew is the best director ever at the clinic. His wealth of knowledge, people skills, organizational skills, and warm personality has won over everyone at the facility. Now being a newlywed will add to the luster of his position. For some reason, society is biased. It tends to trust married people more than single people. Perhaps society thinks singles will up and leave because nothing is holding them back. Having the responsibility as a spouse, the possibility of a family, and the stability of a top-flight career hits a home run all around. We appreciated his assessment of Andrew's career, plus his encouraging words concerning our house hunting task. We promised he would be the first to learn which house we chose. When Mr. Blues left, Andrew and I took out some wedding food to have for dinner. There were only 4 meatballs, 7 chicken salad sandwiches, nothing from the deli tray, 5 stuffed mushrooms, 6 vegetable rolls, a bowl of fruit, 4 slices of bread, and 2 dinner rolls. No desserts and no punch left. Obviously, our wedding guests had enjoyed the food, but there was enough left over for us to eat. Andrew had ginger ale in the refrigerator, and we had wedding cake for dessert. It had been a meaningful first day of our marriage. We walked into the bedroom to get ready for bed. Andrew and I were much more at ease than the night before. I insisted on getting him comfortable so he could get a good night's sleep, be well rested, and ready for the challenges of his job. After he was situated, I also got ready for bed. I kissed his soft lips and joined him in the way we both seemed to enjoy, with me sprawled over him and his arms over me. Finally, we could sleep together with no guilt. Early Monday morning, Andrew was up and at 'em. Before I realized it, he kissed me goodbye on the forehead and said he'd be home about 5:30 p.m. He reminded me of our appointments to look at houses at 6:30 and 7:30. I heard the garage door open and his car motor rev up. The wall clock read 8:37 a.m. I sat up, looked around the room, and after some thought, determined I should take out my luggage and rearrange it in order to be organized for my summer at the music festival. I leisurely went about readying myself for the day and accomplishing the rearrangement task. As usual, Mama had washed and ironed my clothes, so I was all set. However, I knew that would be the very last time Mama would take care of me. The time had come. I was truly on my own. I didn't even own an iron, but Andrew had one. I gulped because I really had to learn how to iron. That thought was a shock to my system. I had been pampered my entire life, even in grad school, and lived as a privileged person. Despite my former station in life, change is underscoring my existence. I must dedicate myself to tackling every change I face. It won't be easy, but I'll grow with every step I take. I'll walk with God, using Mama's teachings, and hold on to Andrew as we make our run toward full adulthood. I tidied up the kitchen while watching the TV. It spewed forth awful news about the ongoing Vietnamese war. The situation was tense. But I had barely thought of it at all. Hundreds of people on both sides had died or seriously injured. There wasn't an end in sight. I thought to myself, that war is a major problem and deserved my attention. I could not allow myself to be sheltered any longer. Reality had smacked me from every direction. I think because the fighting was not on American soil, I felt separated from the terrible facts. No more! I was tuned in, and I cared. I put on some clothes, got into my car, and drove around the vicinity, searching for an eatery. In the distance, I saw a Chinese restaurant. I drove in the parking lot, got out of the car, and went inside. It was a medium-sized business with a large menu. I chose a variety of dishes because I didn't know what Andrew liked. I wanted Andrew to walk in and find dinner ready. I brought the dinners in and arranged them on the kitchen table. The wall clock read 4:56 p.m. I was anxious for Andrew to come home, and I paced. At last, my honey drove into the garage. He rushed in and was surprised to see dinner awaiting him. He commented, "Sweetie, you cooked?" Laughing, I replied, "Yes, I have discovered my hidden culinary talent." He noted I was very resourceful. We enjoyed the food, then went to the address of the first house. First in line was the newly built 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath colonial house. I liked the layout and the size of the rooms. The kitchen was spacious and had its own eating area. The dining room would easily accommodate 8 people. The house was attractive and sat in the middle of the block. However, the yard was small and there was only a 1-car garage. Nevertheless, it was a contender because Andrew noticed a place where a carport could be built. Although a carport would cost less than extending the existing garage, there would be some additional cost. Next, we viewed a charming 4-bedroom, 3.5-bath, mid-century modern bungalow built in 1961. I liked the entrance foyer and large living room that flowed into the dining room. The kitchen had ample space with many cupboards that reached the ceiling and generous counter area. The bathrooms were high-end, with sensible layouts and well-maintained. The bedrooms were roomy, and the master bedroom was fabulous. It had big windows, a large sitting nook, plus an attached big bathroom. The realtor called a 4-piece ensuite. I hadn't heard that term, including a tub and separate standalone shower with a shower seat. Oh, wow. I particularly relished the thought of the shower because I loved the feeling of water running down upon me. Finally, this house hit it out of the ballpark with a wonderful finished basement that led into the attached 2-car garage. The garage could also be accessed by way of the mudroom on the upper level. The large backyard was fenced in with trees behind the fence, which shaded a good portion of the yard. Another positive thing about the property was the location. It was nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac, yet close enough to a main thoroughfare, giving access to other important streets and numerous businesses. In the long run, its roominess would accommodate guests and our future family. I told Andrew I was very impressed with the house. He liked the house too. The main concern was the cost. $8,000 over our budget. Andrew took me aside and asked if I wanted to live in that house. I told him I did. He then turned to the real estate agent to tell him we had made our decision. He exclaimed, "We choose this house," and asked the man to negotiate purchasing the house. The agent smiled, shook our hands, offered congratulations, and promised to make the payments manageable. Andrew twirled me around and said, "Sweetie, we are buying this marvelous house." We signed some preliminary papers designed to hold the house for us until the closing was worked out at the bank. On the way back to the apartment, Andrew stopped at a beverage store to buy a bottle of champagne. He thought we should celebrate making a housing decision which will affect us for years to come. He also thanked the Almighty for providing him with a good job to afford the cost of such a major acquisition. He acknowledged coming a long way since his childhood days at the Green Leaf Orphanage. I said, "God is good." Since Andrew and I really like champagne, we had fun imbibing in the bubbly drink. It tends to make me giggly and playful. We drank and laughed boldly. He told me we had one more important item to purchase before I left for the music festival. I put my arms around his neck and asked, "What could that be?" He answered, "Our bed." I spun around and said, "Well, big boy, we better buy one tomorrow." He agreed and told me to be ready to shop when he came from work. By this time, needless to say, we were somewhat played out, so we gaily went in the bedroom to prepare for bed. Although we were having a good time, Andrew needed to get some rest and have a good night's sleep. Being in charge of such a long and large enterprise was demanding, and I did not want him to make a mistake due to fatigue. I literally put him to bed and quickly followed, snuggling until we fell asleep. The next morning, I barely heard Andrew getting dressed. He kissed me on the forehead, said he'd see me after work, and made a quick exit. The wall clock read 7:32 a.m. He left a note that read, "Forgot to mention I had an 8 a.m. meeting. Love, Andrew." My honey definitely was a disciplined and punctual man. I turned on the television set and watched the Today Show with Hugh Downs. Again, I was bombarded with awful news about the Vietnamese War. I tried to wrap my head around the reasons for wars down through history, but failed to understand how people justified killing one another. I was pleased when the war segment ended. The guests that morning were Sonny and Cher, who entertained in their usual manner. I bathed, dressed, and did what any red-blooded American would do when food was scarce in the cupboards. I ordered a pizza. I also did something I had never done before. Unintentionally, I viewed a soap opera. I watched General Hospital on TV and ate pizza. In the past, I'd been told some women do this daily. What a shame and a waste of time. I was sure this would be my first and last time watching a soap. The whole show seemed unrealistic, particularly their clothes. They were very dressed up. Ladies wore dresses with high heels, men wore suits, and everyone was rich. If they were not rich, they were thieves. I shook my head in disbelief and counted the minutes until Andrew would come home, and wondered how he felt having me here waiting for him. At long last, he came home. I was so happy to see him until I practically jumped on him. He was equally happy to see me. One would have thought we hadn't seen each other in weeks. I showed him the pizza I ordered, and he immediately took a slice. He said his day had been strenuous, but he was ready to help pick a bed for us. I was eager to start the hunt. We jumped into his car and drove to the nearest furniture bed store. The store was in a shopping center that stayed open until 8:30 p.m., which would allow us to take our time trying out beds. Because Andrew was tall, the saleswoman recommended the king size, which had been available only a few years. I asked her to tell us more about that size. She began by saying human beings were getting taller. That was evidenced by looking at a chart in the store that showed beds from the Renaissance to the 60s. Andrew exclaimed, "You mean I am not an oddball?" She said, "You, sir, are the normal male height of the not-so-distant future. Human beings are evolving taller." Andrew was totally astonished. He turned to me and said, "Sweetie, after all is said and done, I will eventually be thought of as a regular guy." The sales lady quipped, "Sir, you will never be thought of as a regular guy because you are an exceptionally well-built man. I'm sure most men would love to have your stature and physique." I quickly thanked the lady for her evaluation of my husband because he needed to hear that summation from someone other than me. He was still dumbfounded, but encouraged about slowly becoming normal. She then showed us an outstanding king-size bed. Andrew said, "This bed is a far cry from the cot I slept on as a kid." I said it was the largest bed I had ever seen. We stretched out on it to feel how comfortable it was. Andrew declared he wanted to buy the bed and asked if I was on board with him. I said, "My cup runneth over with yes, yes, yes." Andrew was excited because that bed would be in our new house waiting for me when I came home from the music festival in August. Andrew and I followed the lady into the office to fill out the papers for the purchase. We thanked the saleswoman for her well-informed assistance and said goodbye. Back at the apartment, we square danced, do-si-doed, spiritedly, because we had begun our marriage with a big bang. All that activity sapped our energy and encouraged us to go to bed. I thanked Andrew for his willingness to supply a sterling, first-class new home and tremendous bed to start our lives together. He replied, "I've been preparing for our marriage since the day we got engaged." He felt it was his duty to provide for his wife. He got in bed and within minutes was sound asleep. I crawled in, positioned myself next to him as close as possible, and listened to his heartbeat until I drifted off. Wednesday morning was the normal get-to-work time. Andrew followed his routine to the T. I knew not to bother him in any way. In due course, when I return from the music festival, I will develop a routine, but for now I was taking it one step at a time. I thought the furnished apartment in which we were temporarily living sufficed quite well. Even though the full-size bed accommodated us, I could not wait to sleep in our giant bed in our new home. I decided to go to the supermarket and pick up a few necessities. There were not many people, so I took my time exploring and hunting for goods. I had gotten pretty good shopping for food with my grad school roommates, so I applied my skills to my wifely duties. Luckily, I saw a deli section. There I could select prepared foods. I picked some large containers of pasta salad and tuna salad. Across the aisle, I picked up a big bag of chips and a half-gallon of grape juice. On the way home, I noticed a bookstore. I stopped to check it out. What a treasure it was. It turns out, Books for All was Erie's pride and joy. This noted establishment had been around since 1939. There were first editions and rare books, as well as recent bestsellers. The store was sort of dark and smelled like old books. It fit the profile of a vintage bookstore perfectly. I fell in love with it. I was eager to tell Andrew about the place, because during his undergraduate days at Northern and Western University, he worked and lived in a bookstore in the summers and at Christmas breaks. I found a magnificent book about Erie's own musical giant, Harry Thacker Burleigh, better known as Mr. H.T. Burleigh, who lived from 1866 through 1949. He was a leading black trained vocalist and composer of classical music who used elements of Negro spirituals as an integral part of his compositional technique. The bookstore owner was thrilled to find out I was a trained and degreed singer who was very, very interested in learning more and more about black classical composers. He promised to keep me posted about any and all books on the topic. I left the store feeling like I struck gold. I didn't realize I spent so much time there, for it was nearly 4 p.m. Back at the apartment, I sat down and dozed off a few minutes, but awakened when my head fell forward and startled me. I guess I was beaten, hadn't sensed it, because I was in a state of total excitement. Just as I got myself together, Andrew came home. I greeted him at the door and told him dinner was ready. Once more he was taken aback by my timing for a meal. I told him he worked hard and deserved to enjoy eating at home with his wife. My selections went over well. After dinner, we called Mama and told her about purchasing the new house. She was so proud of us for going about the business of setting up our lives. Andrew jokingly told her I had dinner waiting for him each evening. She sighed and said, "Wonders never cease." I then informed Andrew of the wonderful bookstore in town and the great book I bought about H.T. Burleigh. He was elated to learn about Erie's bookstore gem and the relevant book I bought about a noteworthy black classical composer born in Erie. Discussing such a heavy topic was so exhilarating until we found ourselves wiped out. So we decided to mosey into the bedroom and go to bed a bit earlier than usual. I'm certain both of us had some residue left over from our wedding festivities and needed a lot more sleep than we were getting. Over the past 6 months, we covered lots of ground and had the right to be worn out. Andrew and I were workaholics who put on a good face in public. The phone rang, and it was the realtor. He informed us that the details concerning the mortgage had been hammered out. The 30-year payment plan comfortably fell within our ability to pay. He said everything would be ready by Friday and wanted us to come in to sign the papers. While looking at me, Andrew told him we would meet him in his office at 12:30 p.m. Friday. Following that conversation, I knew our path to becoming homeowners was cleared. We stretched out on the bed and chatted about a few things. Andrew said it would be wise for him to pick me up at 12:15 so we could be together at the realtor's office for the final signings. He insisted the house be in both names, truly making it our house. He then told me his staff wanted to meet me, and Friday afternoon would be a good time to introduce me to them. They also wanted to take us to dinner to celebrate our recent wedding. After all, we were newlyweds, not even a week old. I was elated at the thought of seeing Andrew's workplace, meeting those who worked there, and having an after-work dinner party. Friday will seal a productive first week of marriage. Unexpectedly, Andrew threw his arms around me and kissed me passionately. At that moment, being married must have hit him from another angle, because he became truly enthralled and pledged his love to me. I promptly accepted his declaration and proclaimed my love for him. While basking in that moment, I began softly singing "The Look of Love in His Ear." This song by Burt Bacharach and Hal David captured the feelings about our love. The look of love is in your eyes, a look your smile can't disguise. The look of love, it's saying so much more than words could ever say. And what my heart has heard, well, it takes my breath away. I can hardly wait to hold you, feel my arms around you. How long I have waited just to love you, now that I have found you. The look of love, it's on your face, a look that time can't erase. Be mine tonight. Let this be just the start of so many nights like this. Let's take a lover's vow and then seal it with a kiss. I can hardly wait to hold you, feel my arms around you. How long I have waited just to love you. Now that I have found you, don't ever go. Don't ever go. I love you so. We were motionless and transfixed with the sentiment conveyed in that song. In due course, we slowly cuddled and allowed ourselves to indulge in the pure sensuousness of our love. It was extremely apparent that Andrew and I had craved sensuousness. I was certain most humans were not capable of extracting the profound pleasures found within the senses. In the past, I was left out in the cold, shut out and rejected due to my lack of sexual emphasis and interest. I often thought, if only I were able to explain to people how gratifying the sensations are, and how they can lift us far, far beyond the simple, basic, rudimentary, primitive, carnal levels of physical expressions in which the overwhelming majority of humans find themselves. Just as humans use only a portion of their brains, humans also utilize merely a fraction of the components of our genetic makeup, which generate emotions such as euphoria, bliss, and inward-induced intoxication. Imagine being elevated to a state of consciousness so incredible until one finds himself carried to a higher plane of existence. Sensuousness absolutely transports me to paradise and seventh heaven. I wallow in sensuousness. All my life, certain musical sounds grabbed me so firmly until I sobbed and yearned for my brand of romantic interlude with a special person. I always wished to be in the presence of someone who ignited me while experiencing music in such a profound way, so I could bathe in their essence and shower them with pure love. Hallelujah, hallelujah! Andrew is that person. I love to touch his skin. I love to look at his gorgeous physique. I love to watch him walk because he moves so beautifully. I love to listen to his deep, resonant speaking voice. I love to run my fingers through his thick, soft, curly black hair. I love how tenderly he holds me. I love to look into his beautiful black eyes. I love his smile. I love him in every way possible. Thursday, after eating some cereal for breakfast, I got everything ready for my departure early Sunday morning. I even called the owner of the dwelling in which I would reside, known as the Rose Manor, because of the pretty roses in the yard, to let her know my plans to arrive between 2 and 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon. It felt strange for me to be preparing to leave my husband. Truly, I don't think I really wanted to go to the music festival. However, I was somewhat relieved when I remembered Philip would be there. Both of us would be without our spouses, but Philip would also be without his son. I kept telling myself he and I had been selected as tops in our areas of music to perform with the very best. But this summer would be a sacrifice to my personal life. Hence, I recalled that were it not for the music festival, I never would have met Andrew. Luckily, Philip and I had suites in the same abode, but at different floors and opposite ends of the residence. I decided to call Philip to see when he would be arriving in Massachusetts, and was pleased to hear he would also get there about 3 p.m. Sunday. To take my mind off that subject, I got in my car and drove to the Mexican restaurant a few miles down the road. There I ordered some tacos and burritos for dinner. While in the restaurant listening to the Mexican music, I asked the man taking my takeout order if he ever listened to Mexican classical music. He laughed and asked, "What's that?" and added, he liked mariachi bands, and handed me my order. I thanked him and left. When I walked into the apartment, a mystical feeling came over me. I truly had the best scenario possible. The potential for a sterling music and voice career and an exemplary marriage. Both facets of my life were necessary for outright fulfillment. Weighing in at the apex of my life's design was my unconditional love for Andrew. While being so deep in thought, time had passed, and Andrew walked in without me hearing him. I looked up, and there he was. I threw my arms around him and told him how happy I was to see him. With a big smile on his face, he said he rushed to the apartment to spend the evening with me. I quickly put the Mexican food out for us to eat. He said he loved tacos and burritos, but he needed to change into something which would allow him to be a little messy. We both used oversized napkins and chowed down like little kids. Everything tasted good, and we had fun devouring the food. Our napkins served their purpose quite well because the burritos dripped sauce. When we finished, I got paper towels to wipe our mouths and clean our hands. Then we polished off the bottle of champagne. The evening developed into a special just the two of us time. By nightfall, we found ourselves engrossed in each other. We took turns sharing stories about our college days. I enjoyed hearing about Andrew's classes because I had no idea he had taken so many medical courses. Continuing, he explained his present duties at the Regional Medical Center. My honey is head administrator in charge of prosthetics, orthotics, physical therapy, and works directly with plastic surgeons. The clinic also works directly with the armed services and VA hospitals. He said the position keeps him busy, but he enjoys the work and appreciates the raise in pay to adequately take care of his family. He held me tightly and told me he was on cloud 9 being my husband. I told him, although it is an honor to be a fellowship singer at the music festival, I did not think I would enjoy it, as in the past, because I preferred being with my husband. Although Andrew regretted not being able to be at the festival with me, he looked forward to moving into our new house and tinkering and tweaking to make it our home. He wants to have it ready for me when the music festival is over. Andrew was a good man to the core. Much too quickly it was bedtime, so we dragged ourselves to the bedroom, freshened up in the bathroom, and hit the sack. I positioned myself over Andrew in only a few minutes and then fell asleep. Surprisingly, Friday morning I awakened before Andrew, but I did not get in his way when he jumped out of bed to prepare himself for work. He greeted me lovingly, went into the bathroom, swiftly showered, dressed, and reminded me he would pick me up about 12:10 to 12:15 to go to the realtor's office and sign the papers to buy the house. Excitedly, he commented, "We have a busy day ahead of us. Everyone at the clinic is eagerly awaiting meeting my bride. I can hardly wait to show you off, Johanna." And then he practically skipped out of the door. Unlike the previous days, I could not dawdle at all. I needed to pick a pretty outfit and make sure my hair was just so. I chose a cream-colored short-sleeved dress with matching wedge shoes. I spent an unusually long time brushing my teeth because I wanted them to sparkle when I smiled. Somehow I was nervous, about as much as I was for my wedding. I suppose it was because the thought of meeting a lot of new people all at once put me in the hot seat. Knowing how punctual Andrew was, I was not only ready at 11:50, but I also walked outside and waited in the driveway for my honey to arrive. He pulled up at 12:05 and said I looked pretty as a princess. Well, he looked rather spiffy, too. We got to the realtor's office at 12:16 p.m. The realtor had the papers on the desk. We read them and began the signing process. There is much legal stuff going on when buying a house. At last we completed signing everything. The man shook our hands and said we were now homeowners. We gleefully left that office and headed to the clinic. Andrew was noticeably pumped up. He really wanted the staff to meet his bride. I, on the other hand, had unexpectedly become the picture of calm, cool, and collected. The facility was quite large and imposing. The final section of the complex had been completed just a year ago. Although the Albany clinic impressed me, the Erie clinic was absolutely mind-boggling. Every department had its own wing and specialized staff. Thus, the complex resembled the U.S. Pentagon. No wonder Andrew was so busy. He was in charge of the entire shebang. Once inside, his demeanor changed. He became Mr. Porter. First, he showed me his grand office and introduced his immediate staff, including his male secretary, Daniel. Daniel was very polite and addressed me as Mrs. Porter, something which I'd have to get accustomed to being called. There were some medical doctors assembled in a conference room who came to consult with Andrew. Therefore, I went back to his office and waited for him to return. I read articles in journals about artificial internal arteries. One was called Evaluation of Tissues and Prosthetic Vascular Grafts. Woo! Another was called The Healing of Vascular Prosthetics. Ooh! Another one was called Evaluation of a New Vascular Prosthesis with Optimal Specifications. Much too much for me. That was some heavy and very interesting reading, which gave me a better insight to the vast world of prosthetics. After long last, Andrew came back and was pleasantly surprised to see I had read articles in his new 1968 journal. I told him I learned a lot. He then continued giving me the tour. Needless to say, I was totally blown away by everything there. When we got back to his office, business hours were over. A number of his staff members had gathered to lead us to the location designated for merriment and celebration. All along, I thought we were going to some restaurant, but alas, the private tea room in the building was awaiting us. When we arrived, those in attendance applauded. Daniel raised his glass and toasted us. I heard "Hear, hear" from the entire room. The CEO of the entire clinic, Mr. Pearson, spoke of the joy he had ever since Mr. Porter became head of operations. Now he knows Mr. Porter is not only a fine leader, but also a happily wedded man. He noted, however, that his new wife was an outstanding soprano who will have to leave him to sing at the prestigious music festival of the Berkshires, where they met only last summer. He continued, "It will be our challenge to see to it that Mr. Porter does not get down in the dumps, missing his bride. That means we must do our utmost to fulfill everything Mr. Porter initiates for the good of this clinic. Excitement will be generated from every corner of this structure." Waiters came out and dinner was served. 26 people enjoyed a fine ribeye steak supper. While eating, at times, some of them asked questions simultaneously, which made me laugh. They were very curious about my life as a concert/opera singer. I shared with them the time I lured Andrew into my practice room and sang the famous aria from Carmen in order to flirt with him openly. Andrew cut in and said it was also his operatic debut, as he portrayed the character Don Jose without singing a note. He also divulged that obviously my singing flirting got to him because we are now married. A man at the far end of the table said, "We must give Mr. Porter his due respect by calling him the Don." Everyone got a kick out of that comment, and some wanted us to perform on an encore. I told them that rare performance was a once-in-a-lifetime event. The group was very cheerful and warm-hearted. I was extremely happy to know my honey had found a good climate in which to work. Andrew then stood and thanked them for providing a lovely celebratory evening. I followed him by telling them their welcoming attitude certainly won me over, and I looked forward to future interactions with them. After about an hour and a half, the people began leaving. Andrew and I followed suit and said our farewells. On the way back to the apartment, I expressed how thrilled I was to have had an opportunity to experience his occupational jurisdiction and how extremely proud I was of him. It had been quite a day, and we were noticeably fading. We sat on the side of the bed and sluggishly disrobed each other, barely able to finish the effort. We crawled under the covers and were knocked out within moments. Andrew and I slept in much later than usual Saturday morning. It was nearly 11 o'clock when we finally stirred. After trips to the bathroom, we got back in bed because we were still bleary-eyed. Andrew told me we could win a prize for accomplishing the most over the past 6 months. As I thought about it, he was right. No wonder we were rather run down. Also, the fact I had to leave my husband after only 1 week of marriage pulled me down even more. Since this was the last full day together until August, we made sure we spent every minute with each other and didn't even put on street clothes. In addition, it was our 1-week anniversary since our gorgeous wedding day. So we wanted to have an unconventional celebration. We rummaged through the refrigerator and found some hot dogs, crackers, and grape Kool-Aid in the cupboard. While not very nutritious, it was enough to tide us over. Andrew promised to have plenty of food in the refrigerator when I came home in August. It was actually kind of fun eating hot dogs and drinking America's go-to drink. We talked about furnishing our new house and how exciting it would be living together. At that point, we discussed having a family. We both wanted 2 children. Andrew commented on my parents, or I should say our parents, because he saw them as role models for us. I told him I hoped to be a good mother like Mama, and I was certain he would be a good father like Daddy. As we talked, the reality of our lives began to unfold. Andrew made it very clear that he was the breadwinner and intended to provide for the family. Any and all money I earned from my music career would be mine to use any way I pleased. I told him I wanted to share my earnings, but he said, however I used my earnings would automatically constitute sharing. I commented, Andrew, you are already like Daddy, because he put the family first. He even brought his paycheck home for Mama to see. Then he went about the monthly chore of paying bills. I don't think he was ever late paying a single bill in his life. Andrew said, Dad is a real man. I remembered at that moment that Daddy and Andrew paid for the wedding without any glitches. I wondered if other young married couples enjoyed cuddling and conversing as much as we did. I looked at my handsome husband and told him he was my best friend. He seemed pleased to hear me say that. We continued cuddling. He whispered, I love you so much until it hurts. Although he was bummed out about being without me for the summer, at least he knew he was loved on the highest level. I tried to put a positive spin to the upcoming summer by telling him every note I would sing for him. He subtly informed me he was planning to fly to Albany Friday morning, July 26th, to spend that weekend with me before attending a conference the following week in Los Angeles. That was terrific news. Now I could set my sights on late July instead of late August. I whispered in his ear, we are going to make it through the summer. But watch out when we come together in August, because it will feel like the Wild West in our new home. He wondered if he would be able to handle me, and I assured him he would, because I would be accessible to him at the drop of his cowboy hat. He liked our spicy conversation so much until he picked me up and carried me to the bedroom. He said I was like Miss Kitty, and he was like Marshal Matt Dillon from the TV show Gunsmoke. Since it was bedtime and I had to rise especially early the next morning to drive, our fantasy Western theme was a nifty way to call it a day, while making it conceivable for us to look down the road and see a hearty and romantic future. I sprawled over Andrew and enjoyed the last sprawl until July. I awakened at 6 a.m., jumped out of bed, showered, dressed, and put the last suitcase in my car. Andrew got up and had toast and jelly and apple juice ready for me. Although both of us seemed a bit gloomy, we forced ourselves to look ahead to July. We embraced demonstratively. Andrew said he would call every Saturday morning. I then got in the car, blew him a kiss, and was on my way. Leaving home and heading to Massachusetts the previous 2 years had been an exhilarating experience, but this year I was quite sad. It seemed wrong to leave my new husband. If the saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder, is true, I'm certain my heart will be ready to explode with impassioned fondness when next I saw my beloved Andrew. The drive was long and lonely. I thought of our beautiful wedding day just a week ago. I was so contemplative until I hardly remembered driving. Luckily, there was not much traffic, so I didn't endanger myself. Before I knew it, I was exiting the Massachusetts Turnpike and heading for Lee, Mass., a town in Berkshire County, a short distance from Lenox, the location of the music festival. I drove to the Rose Manor, checked in, and brought all my luggage inside. The lady who owned the house was friendly and offered to assist in any way she could. I especially liked the large parking area at the side of the house. I didn't have to worry about finding a space after evening concerts. I wrote out a check for her for the entire summer from funds I had received by way of the Voice Fellowship. Unlike last year, I would not have extra spending money for being a dorm counselor, so I would need to be more frugal. We received all our basic meals 7 days a week, so I didn't need much more. Glory be, Philip pulled up. I was truly happy to see him, and he was happy to see me. The first thing he said was, "Hi there, Mrs. Porter," which resonated loudly in my head. We hugged each other and immediately started hanging together. He shared how difficult it was to leave Ursula and baby Phil. In fact, he considered turning down the fellowship, but decided he and I could use each other to soften the sting of being without our spouses. I reminded him we were a tightly knit family. We beamed with joy. Suddenly, the distress of being without our loved ones was somewhat eased. He suggested we go to the grounds, sign in, and find out what music we would perform. As usual, it was exhilarating seeing all the musicians assembling. I knew fewer people because a good number of the old gang did not return, most notably my friend Janie. I also felt much older because I was a married woman. I appreciated the welcome dinner, for I was hungry. Phil and I introduced ourselves to many that afternoon and were wiped out by the end of the opening exercises. I was ready to go back to the house and go to bed. Once there, it felt strange sleeping alone, but my fatigue put me to sleep. The first week was filled with a plethora of music. A major work for singers would be Schicksalslied, which is translated Song of Destiny, Opus 54, by Johannes Brahms, plus an assortment of other smaller choral gems by various composers. For the solo voice, the emphasis was works for orchestra and voice. I was to sing Ah Perfido, translated means Ah Deceiver, Opus 65, for soprano and orchestra by Ludwig van Beethoven. The seventh week would feature the fellowship orchestra with fellowship soloists. The piece was challenging, so I had my work cut out for me. Luckily, I had studied and sung it before. Therefore, I had a head start. Although all the singers were first-rate, only the elite singers were assigned a concert aria. I was excited and honored to be once more designated as one of the top 10 singers at the festival. The creme de la creme. Now I could focus on my voice, the very reason I was there. Philip also was picked to solo with the orchestra. He would thrill the audience by playing Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. He was pumped and ready to get to work. We both had plenty to keep us busy. The festival had hired some of the world's premier musician specialists to give master classes on the art of performing, and I was looking forward to digesting as much as possible over the weeks, because there was so much to accomplish. The time actually passed quickly. I found myself tirelessly concentrating on the assigned solo repertoire and the choral repertoire. The more music I absorbed, the better life felt. I was sorry I couldn't celebrate Andrew's birthday with him on July 18th. Also, the anniversary of the day we met. I did, however, send him a birthday card, which expressed how happy I was he was born. It was important for me to emphasize the world is a better place because he was born, and I was the luckiest woman in the world to have met and married him. He called the evening of his birthday to remember that date as the wonderful day we introduced ourselves to each other. I reflected on that date the following day, the evening Andrew convinced me to become his girlfriend. Talking to him made me yearn to be in his arms. It was difficult to hang up. Moments after Andrew and I finished talking, Philip knocked on my door. He also remembered the date and stopped by my suite to reminisce about last year, and then surprised me a few minutes later when Ursula and the baby showed up at my door. Ursula had reflected on that date because she was in on the plan to get Andrew and me together. I told them Andrew would come the next weekend. I then took baby Phil and told him he was also in on the plan. Baby Phil seemed to understand and laughed. I told him I was his aunt, and hopefully in the not-so-distant future, he would have a new cousin. After everyone left, I got ready for bed. My mind raced through the year. I could not get over my station in life. I said a little prayer and went to sleep. When I awakened the next morning, I gave thanks that my days would be filled with high-powered rehearsals. Wasting no time, I knuckled down and focused on polishing the demanding concert aria to be sung in Italian. The text is so full of drama until I had to pour myself into every phrase. This concert aria requires the singer to act with the voice so much until the audience gets a sense of the magnitude and alarm ringing in every note. This woman is right on the edge of her mind. Ah, perfido is the cry of a woman who has been betrayed in love, who is talking and thinking out loud. When I finished practicing the piece, I was exhausted and could hardly walk. Beethoven certainly knew how to compose music that pulled emotions right out for all to hear. There are outbursts which make the tempo vacillate. It is a one-woman, 15-minute dramatic piece where the singer provides the scenery, costume, and story background with minimalist acting using only facial expressions and attitude. Singing this piece will be a supreme test on every level. At long last, it was Friday, July 26th. Andrew would be arriving in the afternoon and meeting me at the festival grounds. I felt a surge of energy which launched me into the high gear that had been missing all summer. I had more pep to my step with strides full of swagger. I smiled at everyone and presented myself confidently as I navigated through the day. Shortly after the much-anticipated master class with baritone Charles Mans, Andrew drove into the parking lot. At first, I didn't recognize him because he was driving a rental car from the airport. However, when he got out of the car, I sprinted to him, threw my arms around him, and squeezed him as tight as I could. Absence does make the heart grow fonder. Now all was right with the world because my husband and I were together. Needless to say, We had a wonderful weekend. We spent the entire time at a hotel away from the music festival activities. Andrew left early Sunday afternoon, in time to catch his flight to LA. Unlike the previous 2 years at the festival, I did not fret about every little thing. I knew life would go on and weave its magic around me, regardless of the scenarios facing me in that setting. Proper preparation, determination, and a helping hand from the Almighty would be my formula for success and happiness. That formula did indeed work, for my solo appearance with the Fellowship Orchestra was absolutely outstanding. Everyone thought I sang that difficult piece with vocal authority and technical ease. I called Mama to tell her and Daddy about my triumph. They were pleased to hear the good news. When I talked to Andrew on the phone, he told me I did not know how magnificent a singer I was. He said my humbleness will get me wherever I need to go because people will embrace my talent and my effervescent personality. Philip also wowed the audience with his spectacular playing of Rhapsody in Blue. He made the clarinet sound, ooh, heavenly and jazzy. He is a gifted player far beyond the normal parameters for fine clarinetists. Although Philip was overjoyed with his playing, he said his performance was a springboard for his new band camp, which has its inaugural gathering Monday, August 26th. Because of his tight schedule, he would leave the festival Friday, August 23rd, and miss the finale in order to have time to prepare for the camp. This all came about because Philip decided to upgrade the pep band to a marching band for the football season, hoping to ignite more interest in music. I stayed for the last concert on Saturday evening, August 24th. Also, Mama's birthday. I hoped she received the touching birthday card I sent her. I was excited when the festival came to an end. I packed a week in advance and was eager to say bye-bye to everyone. My thoughts were of Andrew and life in our new home. Driving to Erie Sunday morning was exhilarating. I could not imagine what Andrew had done to spruce up our house, but I knew it would be done in good taste. At long last, I arrived at my new home. It was absolutely beautiful. Andrew had planted flowers along the edge of the driveway and placed small shrubs at the base of the front window. He made sure everything was manicured to perfection. Plus, the trees had grown out in the backyard and looked amazing. What a fabulous house we chose to make our home. Andrew ran out to meet me, and I was so happy to be back with him. We stood holding each other for a few moments. Tears of joy filled my eyes. He repeated my name again and again. I melted in his arms. He took my hand and guided me into our house. I was astonished to see the lovely furniture he had chosen. He even placed artworks on the walls. I asked him how he found time to do all this. He said he missed me so much until he filled every moment of loneliness by doing something to the house which made him feel I was coming home to him. Next, he took me upstairs to see our king-size bed. I could not get over its massive size. Luckily, our bedroom was large enough to accommodate the giant bed. Andrew asked if his choices pleased me. Swiftly and affirmatively, I answered, of course, yes. I assured him his taste in home furnishings was impeccable. The last area he showed me was the new table tennis table in the nicely finished basement. It was a large, open, comfortable space with some beanbag chairs and a simple couch. Andrew had built a small bar that had a little refrigerator and a cooktop built in. I was quite impressed with his handiwork. He really wanted us to have a finished home and not a work in progress. He prepared an enchanting welcome home sign for me. There were pretty flowers and candles on our new dining room table. He served ratatouille full of zucchini and eggplant, which I loved, with couscous instead of rice. He baked a cherry pie and had homemade honeydew melon ice cream made with an old-fashioned hand-cranked ice cream maker. He topped everything off with a bottle of champagne, our favorite beverage. What a magnificent evening it was. Andrew presented me with perfection wrapped in love. For a few moments, I looked at him from across the table and marveled at him. After washing dishes, we headed to our bedroom. We could not wait to stretch out in our bed. Actually, I really wanted to sprawl over Andrew. During the next few days, I began to think about my musical future. I wondered if I should seek employment at a local university, perhaps an area music center. Had need for an applied voice teacher. Realistically, however, it was probably too late to hunt because the school year was fast approaching. Unexpectedly, I received a call from a man at a local college radio station who was interested in having me host a program on classical music called Hyped on Classical Music. He said word had gotten out about me moving to Erie, and he wanted to be the first to use my talent and knowledge. Furthermore, a representative from the college had gone to the musical festival to hear me sing with the orchestra. That person came back raving about my performance and insisted the radio station scoop me up. The very next day, I received a call from the Philharmonia Orchestra of Erie asking if I was available to solo with the Erie Philharmonia Chorister in mid-December or November for a performance of Honegger's dramatic poem Le Roi David, which means King David. Literally overnight, my musical life started to take shape. I said yes to both offers and began digging for interesting angles about classical music for the radio program and learning the soprano solo, "Oh, Had I Wings Like a Dove," from the Honegger work. That meant I had to ask Andrew for one more extremely important acquisition for our home: a grand piano. He had already thought of that, but could not do anything about it until I came home. He had the name of a highly respected piano store in the area and took me there to try out pianos. I fell in love with the German vintage Bechstall grand piano, which had been set aside for me to play. The touch and crystal sound of the instrument was divine. Normally the price was quite costly, but because my sterling music reputation had preceded my residency in Erie, the owner cut the price substantially to be able to tell the world I purchased such an elite piano from his piano company. Essentially, I allowed him to use my name when advertising his business. It was a win-win situation for both of us. Almost without trying, my days were filled with musical projects. Although I did not want to get bogged down with a church job, I did agree to sing solos at 2 large churches. Andrew was impressed with how quickly I began to establish myself in Erie. I felt I should earn some money to help pay for the piano. Being on the radio weekly hastened my recognition substantially. Erie Coastal Shores College radio station, WECS, became the station for classical music. Before long, my popularity led to expanding the program to air twice a week. That meant I had to do twice the preparation. As a result, the college music department asked me to become head of their applied voice division beginning the 2nd semester. Because it was a small liberal arts college founded in 1948, it had not focused major attention on its music department. Now, however, the radio program added music credibility to the school, which prompted them to build their music program into a competitive specialization. Suddenly, I was a local celebrity singing and speaking for various events. I was earning quite enough money to help pay for not only the piano, but other unexpected bills as well. My triumphant appearance with the Erie Philharmonic choristers and orchestra absolutely sealed the deal. Therefore, upon hearing about my new position at ECS College, students began flocking to the school for voice lessons and music classes. Andrew and I were so busy until we had to make dates to spend personal time together. Thinking ahead, we decided to host Thanksgiving dinner for the family at our home in order to have a Christmas honeymoon vacation for ourselves. The King David concert was quite a vocal introduction to Erie. The city truly knew it had a professional soprano residing there, and it responded by calling upon me to do a variety of musical things, including adjudicating a high school singing competition. The Thanksgiving holiday rushed in. Andrew was off Thursday and Friday. We invited our parents, Philip, Ursula, and little Phil, to spend Thanksgiving with us. My mother insisted upon cooking the turkey and bringing it because she thought we were too busy to shop for and prepare such a large meal. And, of course, she was right. We welcomed her assistance. Needless to say, the meal was absolutely delicious. The day was very special because everybody was at our home. Philip and Ursula congratulated us on buying such a fine house. After dinner, in 2 cars, we took everybody on a guided tour of the area, which included Andrew's workplace and the college where I worked. Ursula, Philip, and little Phil left shortly after the tour because the little one had to go to bed and Ursula had to get a proper amount of sleep to be ready for the next day. Our parents spent the night. We encouraged them to sleep in our giant bed. We slept in the guest bed. They raved about the bed the next morning and thanked us for allowing them to use it. Andrew said they must have 5-star service whenever they visit. It was nice being able to lounge and snack in the house with our folks. They really liked the house and said we accomplished much in a short period of time. They left around 3 o'clock Friday afternoon, giving them time to get back to Youngstown before nightfall.